morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. It's my first trip to Finland, and for me, Finland and the Nordic region generally, I've seen from this and my previous job, they're some of the most innovative parts of the European Union, and a lot of that innovation is stemming from how you manage natural resources and see new opportunities arising from that. But the first thing I want to say is greetings on behalf of my Director General, Timo, who cares a lot about the forest-based sector, as you might expect, and who had a meeting just a month ago with the FTP. So he's fully aware of all the issues and all the excellent work that you're doing. My brief this morning is to talk about the big picture and 2050 climate neutrality for the European Union. So that's what I'll attempt to do. Of course, today is a critical day for us. All morning at the European Parliament in Strasbourg, there's going to be a debate on the appointment of the new Commission. And at midday, so I hope there's a bit of a pause around midday, there will be the voting. And we'll see then what happens. But I mean, my expectation is that as of next Monday, the new Commission headed by Ursula von der Leyen will hit the ground running. And it will hit the ground running based on a political program which has already been out there in the public domain now since July. So the key elements of the new Commission's program start with a European Green Deal. And this will be in the responsibility of Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans, working with a project teams being the way in which we've reorganized the way we work in the Commission over the last mandate. And we'll be contributing to that European Green Deal because, as my future Commissioner Thierry Breton has said, and as Frans Timmermans and Ursula von der Leyen have both said in the last few days, you cannot really have a European Green Deal unless you are incorporating into that the transformation of industry, the creation of jobs and investment and opportunities in Europe. So it cannot just be about purely environmental goals. You need all the elements of, all the parts of the economy need to contribute if you're going to have a successful European Green Deal. Just a word on my future Commissioner, a very experienced businessman. He's expecting to have a lot of input from us on how to transform energy-intensive industries, how to address resource security from critical raw materials, but also he's going to want to bring together 3 or 4 elements of his broad portfolio. On the one hand, he has the single market and industrial policy. He's also going to have now a separate area on defense and space, and he will also be responsible for all things digital. What that means is, I think he's going to expect a much greater convergence in terms of, if you like, the regular industrial ecosystem and the strategic sectors such as defense and space and aerospace. He's also going to want much more convergence between industrial change and the whole digital side of things, a lot more coming together of how digital developments can power and drive the change and create new business models. And just in the last few hours, he's been given an extra responsibility, which is developing the data economy. So this whole who controls data is one of those global issues that we need to catch up on in the face of what's happening in the big American tech companies and so forth. Anyway, that's what's likely to happen on that side. European Green Deal, what Ursula von der Leyen has said is that she wants Europe to be the first region in the world to set the goal of becoming climate neutral by 2050. And the way she wants to do that is through proposing a climate law, which will embed that in a legislative commitment. She's also said that she wants to raise the level of ambition to 2030, because if we're going to raise the level of ambition to 2050, maybe we need to do more in the short term to make our the later part of the period easier to achieve. Then another dimension is going to be biodiversity. There's a major UN conference coming up on this next year, and Europe wants to be ready. So under the Green Deal, there will be a new biodiversity strategy, and one of the areas that we'll be looking at very closely is how you can ensure that forests can at the same time provide the kind of growth and renewal that Lena was talking about and protect species. And that is a challenge that is made harder, as she was saying, because the forests are not static. They're also having, they have vulnerabilities which come with the changing climate. So it's a difficult balancing act, but we want to make sure that there's a clear understanding that biodiversity has to be protected, but the best way you can do that is through active management of resources and making sure that you avoid damaging side effects of economic activities. Then, all within the first 100 days, I'm expecting that the European Green Deal strategy will be out within weeks. The biodiversity and climate law proposals will follow in very short time thereafter. And still within the 100 days, the first 100 days, we will have the new Circular Economy Action Plan and the new industrial strategy. So all these things have to fit together, and I think the key articulation will come in the Green Deal strategy shortly. We've been doing a lot of work in DG GROW to prepare for this new industrial strategy. My colleagues have been doing a lot of work on the development of strategic value chains, which are all about collaboration. It's about bringing different industrial sectors together, different member states, and having a really good think about the direction of travel for breakthrough technology, identifying project pipelines, trying to create the basis for future investments in transformation of industry. And the ones that are most relevant to our work are the one on low emission and circular industry and the one on the hydrogen strategic value chain. Of course, we're already working on the batteries one. That's been busy for a couple of years and is achieving quite a lot of traction. Then the work that my team has been doing together with other parts of the Commission in recent months has been done in the framework of the high-level group on energy-intensive industries, and it's been industry-driven. It's had all of the member states which have energy-intensive industries in the room, so 17 or 18 member states, including Finland, and it's got the financial institutions, it's got environmental and climate NGOs, and we also opened up the work to bring in a lot of expertise that wouldn't normally be there. So we brought in lots of think tanks, research organizations. We brought in the Institutional Investors Group for Climate Change, just to try to get a good understanding of the challenges of how you transform the energy-intensive part of the economy. And I'm pleased to announce that the master plan, as it's called, rather humbly, will be published tomorrow at midday. And it's designed to feed into both the European Green Deal and the future industrial strategy. And the main elements of this master plan are as follows. Firstly, we need to create markets for clean, circular products. This means that you need to provide the tools so that business consumers or household consumers can make informed choices. Sometimes they may need to have incentives to choose a clean product over a dirtier one. This involves things like developing product labeling, developing product environmental footprint, looking at life cycle assessments. It also means looking at how you can use public procurement and standard setting to differentiate clean products made in Europe from imported products which may be much more carbon intensive in the way that they've been produced. And this leads us on to the carbon border adjustment issue, which Ursula von der Leyen announced as one of the things that she would like to develop. This is about looking at how we can make the transformation in Europe that we want to achieve very ambitious climate goals, but not as a result losing our economy. We need to make sure that we prevent carbon leakage and keep jobs and investment in Europe. And that's the idea between how you can level the playing field. It's not anti any region in the world. It's about supporting our levels of climate ambition. The second area of work in the master plan is all about the topic of today's conference, research and innovation. And there's a lot in there about the need for a joined-up approach to research and innovation, making sure that you bring the good ideas from the earliest lab phase and bring them to market. And if I have one criticism, it would be that we have been very good at putting large amounts of public money, whether it's European or national, into research and innovation, but we've been letting too many opportunities slip away when it comes to getting these to market and developing new businesses and creating the value that needs to come from R&I made in Europe. And one of the ideas that we have is that all the big energy-intensive sectors should, starting from 2025 and no later than 2030, be putting out their large-scale industrial demonstrators of breakthrough technologies. Many of these will involve close collaboration between 2 or more industrial sectors. And I think that the forest-based sectors and the bioeconomy side of things is ideally placed to contribute to a number of these different breakthrough technology projects. And we also identify the investment side of things. This is very much linked to how you can draw in private investment to the good areas that will support Europe's actions to prevent climate change. And it's also about directing public finances in a joined-up way to support things as you bring them to market. The third area is all about replacing fossil fuels with clean energy sources and clean feedstocks. So a lot of it's about what can replace oil, gas and coal, and clearly renewable resources such as those coming from the forest are well positioned, provided we're not just talking about using it as an energy source. There has to be a much broader understanding of the potential of what comes out of the forest, but also the limits. If everyone wants 200% of what comes out of the forest, things are not going to add up. So I think we need a sense of prioritization and feasibility in terms of where we make the best use of forest-based resources. This part of the master plan is also looking at infrastructure, how we connect industry with an integrated infrastructure able to deal with the energy carrying, the feedstock carrying, the storage side of things, but also the digital infrastructure that will be needed a lot more in the future. And throughout all this master plan, we're looking very much at what it means for people. People as consumers, people as citizens, people as students or workers, which is where the skills dimension comes in very strongly, and people in communities which may be close to things that are happening, whether it's an industry which is undergoing a massive transformation or whether it's energy or infrastructure projects. So we have to deal with this whole social acceptance dimension, which is also part of Ursula von der Leyen's guidelines, where she talks about no region being left behind and the need for a just transition. So these are some of the elements that we're working on currently. As I say, the master plan will be out tomorrow. And then more specifically on the raw materials side, we've had a very interesting raw materials week just last week, and several of you were there, and I thank you for coming and speaking there. And what we're now preparing is the next EU list of critical raw materials, which is not just about metals and minerals. We also have biotics in the assessment. And on the 12th of December, we're organizing a special meeting with our very important stakeholder communities, Raw Materials Supply Group and the European Innovation Partnership for Raw Materials, to look at what kind of actions should go into the critical raw materials list this time. What do we need to do more that we're not doing today, or what do we need to do differently in order to reduce our risks on the raw materials side? And I mean raw materials in the value chain sense, including all the processing and refining and the recycling at the end of use phase. So these are some of the things we're working on. And I believe that the work that you're doing here which is very powerful on the research and innovation side, is a very good example of forward thinking, strategic thinking. We had this work presented last week at the Raw Materials Week, and we also had a very good presentation of a 2050 vision by the forest-based sectors, which I think for us is trying to get all the players together. And I wish you all the very best for a successful conference here today. Thank you very much.